Hi, my name is Genesis Macias, and today I will be talking about plea bargaining. Yeah. So my prior understanding of plea bargaining, well, I've been in a lot of criminal justice classes and I've seen a lot of Law and Order. So I have a general understanding of what plea bargaining is. And what I think it is when the the DA and the prosecutor come to an agreement and the defendant pleads guilty for a lesser sentence. I feel like this is pretty common because a lot of people don't want to go to trial and risk being found guilty and getting a big sentence. So instead, they just plead guilty and get a fixed time that they're somewhat okay with, what they would rather have. So what is plea bargaining? Well, plea bargaining doesn't have an exact definition, but it's basically the same thing that I thought it was. When both parties, the DA and the prosecution, come to an agreement and the defendant pleads guilty for something. There's different types of plea bargaining, and I will get to that in a second. But yeah, when plea bargaining happenings, both parties do gain something. The prosecutor gains a conviction, and the defense attorney usually gets a lesser sentence for their client. In the US, 97% of criminal defendants plead guilty instead of standing trial, which I understand why. Like I said, they would rather plead guilty and get something that they're okay with than risking going to trial and getting a higher sentence. Like for example, first-degree murder. Like you can plead guilty and get life in prison instead, which is still, a big punishment, but not really when you take into consideration that one of the risks of being found guilty of first-degree murder is death penalty. So they don't want to risk death penalty, so they'll agree to life in prison. How does it affect our system? Well, plea bargaining is essential to the administration of justice. If every defendant demanded their right to a trial, the criminal justice system would literally collapse. It didn't really go much into detail into the book about why it would collapse, but I feel like it would collapse because the courts don't really have the resources to give everybody a speedy trial. We don't have the resources to have a jury, to have all these jury trials. We don't have the resources for a lot of stuff well, we have the resources, but we don't have enough resources for everybody to have a trial, which is why plea bargaining is essential, because like 97% of criminal defendants plead guilty. That's almost 100%. Like that's a big number. And if they weren't pleading guilty, we wouldn't. I feel like we wouldn't even be able to give everybody a trial because we wouldn't have enough resources. So plea bargaining has different types. There's charge, sentence, substitution, and condition bargaining. Charge bargaining is when you bargain for a lesser charge. Like instead of first-degree murder, you agree to second-degree murder. Sentence bargaining, that's when you plead guilty for a lesser sentence. And I feel like sentence bargaining is, I don't want to say the most common, but it's the most known. Like me personally, I only knew of sentence bargaining. I didn't know about the other three. And I feel like that's the case for a lot of people because, like I said, I watch a lot of Law and Order. I watch a lot of TV. And when you watch stuff like that, you basically, you really only see sentence bargaining. So I feel like that's what most people are aware of. Substitution bargaining, that's when someone's convicted of when someone's charged with an embarrassing crime, a substitution is offered. Like, instead of being charged with the solicitation of a prostitute in public, you'll be charged with disturbing the peace. It's basically the same thing, but one carries less stigma. One is less embarrassing. And then condition bargaining. This is when the defendant pleads guilty so they can be sent to a convenient correctional facility. I feel like condition bargaining, that's I don't want to say I don't get it, because I mean I do get it. It's just I didn't know about that one. I mean, I didn't really know about any of them besides sentence bargaining, but agreeing to go to a different, well, when I first read it, I thought like instead of going to prison, you'll go to jail or something, but then I realized that there's different like centers, like there's mental health centers, there's rehabilitation centers, there's all kinds of different places that you can be sent. And I mean, I can see why condition bargaining is the thing. So, arguments for and against plea bargaining. When it comes to topics like this in the criminal justice system, there's always benefits and there's always cons. So for the benefits, the first benefit is that it gives prosecutors the ability to work with a busy caseload, because prosecutors are very busy people, and if they had to give all of their clients a trial, it couldn't be done. They wouldn't be able to. They couldn't handle it. Another is it helps DA by allowing them to focus on cases that they deem worthy of trial. And it also benefits the courts in the way that the prompt disposition of cases saves the judicial resources, which I feel has to do with because of this, it saves resources, which is why I think that if we didn't have plea bargaining, we wouldn't have enough resources. Yes. And then it also benefits the victims because they get it done quickly. They don't have to stand trial, because a lot of victims don't want to stand trial. And then it also guarantees the conviction, because if they were to go to trial, then the victim would be risking the defendant going free. So, and then along with benefits, there's a lot of cons. The first con being that it takes away the chance of the defendant of getting an acquittal. It takes away some of their important rights, like the right to a speedy trial. There's also a con of overcharging, and overcharging can be when a defendant pleads guilty to more charges than he would have been found guilty of in trial. It also undermines the criminal justice system in the way that it's basically letting criminals get away with their crimes. This meaning, it's giving them more lenient sentences. It's giving them no sentence at all. It's giving them probation instead of jail time, prison time, things like that. And then in the book, it talks about this more extreme critique, which is innocent individuals pleading guilty to crimes they didn't commit because they feel coerced. Coerced? I don't know if that's how you pronounce it, but a case of this is North Carolina versus Alford. And in the book, it gives this quote. It gives this quote saying, "I pleaded guilty on second-degree murder because they said there is too much evidence, but I ain't shot no man, but I take the fault for the other man. We never had an argument in our life, and I just pleaded guilty because they said if I didn't, they would gas me for it. And that is all. And this quote kind of shows how enough pressure and intimidation can get somebody to plead guilty for something they didn't do. And I completely understand that. I feel like that happens a lot more than we think it does, because when you're in a situation like that, I mean, I've luckily never been in a situation like that, but I feel like it's stressful. Many people can crack under that pressure. Many people can't handle interrogation. Many people can't handle the amount of intimidation that they have for these people in power. And when you're being told, if you go to trial, we have enough evidence, and we're gonna make sure you get the maximum penalty that you can get. It's scary. It's stressful, and I feel like it'll be easy for people to crack and just, I don't want life in prison, so I'm just going to plead guilty and get 15 years, even though I didn't do this crime. I don't see why it's an extreme critique, because I feel like it happens a lot. It's just some people aren't as strong as others, and they can crack easily under those circumstances. So, banning plea bargaining. Well, several jurisdictions have experimented with limiting plea bargaining. The one talked about in the book is Alaska. Alaska banned all forms of plea bargaining from 1975 to 1990. And ever since 2013, they've only banned sentence bargaining. They banned sentence bargaining. They can still bargain for, charges or substitution or stuff like that, but you can't. They banned sentence bargaining. So besides Alaska, some other jurisdictions still have restrictions, but more or less, this practice is still going unabated. It hasn't really been taken completely away anywhere. My personal view on plea bargaining. So I'm going to give my personal view on plea bargaining. And when I think of plea bargaining, I can see how it's needed for some cases, but I feel like it shouldn't be offered to certain ones. Like definitely first-degree murder, I feel like they shouldn't have any option of plea bargaining. Rape, I don't think rape should be able to get a plea bargain. If you knowingly, purposefully do something that is going to hurt someone else, I feel like you should have to stand trial and face the consequences instead of coming to an agreement and getting something less. Because like in the book, it talked about this lady that held multiple elderly disabled people in the basement or in cabinets, or just when she like starved them. She didn't let them go to the bathroom. She abused them. I think three of the people died in her care, and she did all of this just so she could get all of their benefits. She can get their Social Security, and I don't remember if she took a plea bargain, but like cases like that shouldn't. I mean, you knowingly abuse somebody, and you deserve to stand trial and risk getting what you deserve. It's what you deserve. I mean, that's my personal view on it. I can see where it's needed. Like, for instance, in a case where someone is mentally ill, we all know how hard it is to plead insanity, but, they can come to a plea bargain, and instead of serving life in prison, they're serving another fixed time at like a mental health facility. And in cases like that, I can see why it's needed. So And that is what I think of, that is what I think of plea bargaining.